any time that you might see an act of violence happening in one of the state prisons, what is the reaction as someone who's coming in and working hard to be an agent of change in the state?
The reaction is, that we combat that violence, right, in a very aggressive manner. We don't condone it. We certainly don't put an environment out there that encourages it. We really want to be responsive to it. And so anytime there's an act of violence, whether it's one individual or multiple individuals, we want to respond strongly and swiftly in ways that hold the individuals accountable who were involved in it. Certainly make sure anybody who needs attention gets attention and treatment, and then most importantly, make sure that staff are okay and recognize what happened, process through that, and learn from it. And I think that's the most important piece long term, is that when these situations happen, whether we talk about situations recently or situations of the past, that we learn from it and we implement changes or enhancements, improvements to try to mitigate them in the future or move on beyond them.
And obviously, when we see snippets of an event that happened, that's all we're really seeing. And so, what do you want to say to combat any sort of rumor mill that might go on around there?
My response really is multifaceted. Number one, I'm never going to pretend that we're perfect, right? And so situations happen, unfortunately, right? And we take them very seriously. We respond very seriously to them. But a lot of what we see, a lot of what is played out publicly, a lot of the things that people are saying about us publicly in the media are very snippet driven. They do not give the whole picture of a prison environment. They don't give the whole picture of the complexities at hand. And they don't serve the purpose to help what we're doing. I've been in the director's seat now for just over 2 years. And as I came in, the push for me coming in here is to try to turn the system into a little bit of a different direction. And everybody who knows corrections, and again, all the complexities and dynamics of corrections, know it takes a lot of time, takes a lot of energy, takes a lot of resources to do that, right? And so for people to start throwing accusations about the work we're doing, or consider the actions of staff to not be what we need in 2025, or any of these other things that we're hearing based upon these little snippet of videos, it's not fair to what the department's doing. We're really focused on solving the complex issue of incarceration, which includes violence, which includes staffing, which includes healthcare services, and everything in between. And so it's not helpful when there's a little snippet that's aired publicly. We're responding to that. We already know what's going on. We already know the dynamics that led to that before it airs publicly. Really what I wish people would focus on is supporting the work that we're trying to do on the ground, that the staff are working tirelessly to do, rather than try and sensationalize all of these little nuances, these little situations, these little clips or videos.
Now, let's talk a little bit about your idea of reimagining corrections. Where did you kind of come up with this idea of reimagining what this department looks like? And obviously, you could probably talk about it for hours, what some of the key points are, but what are kind of the bullet points of what that means to you as a director getting started?
So it was important to me, as I mentioned, coming in. I obviously am not from Arizona. I came in with experience in corrections in other states, with what works, what doesn't work, and really a good idea of what's happened in Arizona leading up to me being here. What I realized in the very early weeks and months of being here is, yes, nearly everybody wants the system to turn in a little bit of a different direction. There's large support for that. And the staff really want to do something different. They really want to do corrections in a more modern way. It was really about establishing a good foundation and a good vision for everybody to rally behind. And as we were talking and as I was learning more, this idea of kind of redefining or reconceptualizing what it means to do corrections here was kind of the common theme amongst, again, staff, amongst community members, policymakers, and everybody in between. And so that's really where the idea of reimagining corrections came from, is It's a vision for the agency. It's a vision for corrections across the state that gives every stakeholder the autonomy to start redefining what that means and to redo some of those past practices, to revisit some of the old challenges and try to approach them differently. It's not an approach that is, soft on crime or, is very programmatic focused. It's really just about being smart. Some of the strategies that we put in place, some people would say, are tougher than things of the past. Other strategies we put in place, some would say, are more programmatic or rehabilitative. Some are very treatment focused, right? It takes all of those things. And so it's really just about doing what I call good corrections, right? What makes sense in 2025? And if we view it in that lens, if we realize that doing good corrections leads to better public safety, better results when people release, then I think people can rally behind that. But people also have to understand it takes a lot of work to establish that. It takes a lot of work to have an agency that really buys into that and understands that and practices it every day. And that's what we're going through right now.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for that discussion, and probably the biggest wing of that, is staffing. Because when you look through your reports and you look through the things you're pointing toward as, hey, this is what we really want to improve, it all is coming down to, in a lot of ways, the staffing. And so what are the conversations like with the current staff? And I know that there's been some issues with attrition of staff. So what conversations have transpired in light of that with current staff to keep them on board and new staff to bring them on?
Yeah, staffing's our number one challenge. It has been since I arrived here. It's going to be when we look in Arizona, but when we look beyond Arizona, staffing in corrections, staffing in prisons is the number one issue across the country. And so we've taken a really aggressive approach to how we solve that, or how we try to solve that, and it requires us to change up how we recruit people. I've been very transparent in, we've brought in a large number of new recruits. The last 2 years, we've had very high numbers of new hires coming in. The struggle is keeping them with us long term, but also retaining the staff that we already have. And there's a whole host of factors that go into that, right? Some of it is the dynamics of corrections, right? Obviously, an uptick in violence drives some staff out. An uptick in drugs being trafficked in through the mail or other things, or being exposed to those substances, drive staff out. But pay also is a big factor, and that's really the elephant in the room in a lot of conversations, because people want to recognize that staffing's a problem. People want us to do more, to bring more staff in, and we want to, but we only have the resources that we have. And so a lot of what we've done in the last several months is figure out where can we pull resources elsewhere in the department, which impacts things in other areas, in order to devote more resources to staff. We've implemented high-risk pay. We've increased that amount for staff to try to incentivize working in some of our higher-risk areas. We've increased overtime because we need shifts filled, but all of that comes at a cost. And so, every opportunity we get, we're publicly and privately talking about the need for more resources that need to go directly to our staff. And that's going to help us recruit better, retain people longer, and have a healthier staffing package as we go forward.
Obviously, a lot of that has to come from the legislation. What have the latest conversations been like with lawmakers about what you need to really get this up and running and get more people in the door as correction officers and other staff members in these prisons?
The conversations have been positive. With every policymaker that I've met with, everybody understands the issue. Everybody recognizes the issue. Everybody recognizes the importance of it. What it really boils down to is, where does it get prioritized in the overall budget negotiations? And that's what we all sit on the edge of our seat waiting to find out. So in one-on-one conversations and small group conversations, I feel very good about the support that we have for a potential pay raise, for potential better support financially as we go forward. But again, until that budget comes out and is signed, we don't know. We're kind of left just waiting on pins and needles. And so we're hopeful, but we don't want to get our hopes too high. And we're prepared if we unfortunately don't receive that support as we go forward. We're prepared to, again, go back to the drawing board and figure out what else we can reprioritize, because at the end of the day, we have to support our staff first and foremost.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. If, let's say, things don't go your way for budgeting, what are some of the things that you can tell people you'll be prioritizing to continue to reimagine corrections?
It's tough. We've already done it in this fiscal year where we've reprioritized some savings and things, and we're going to have to really roll up our sleeves and do that again next year, depending on what the budget package looks like that we receive. The hardest part of it is we have so many competing priorities of what needs to be done with this agency, right? Obviously, we're under a federal court injunction, a sweeping injunction related to healthcare services and conditions of confinement. And so we can't just say the investments made there are no longer and reroute them otherwise, because then we have a different focus from the court, right? And we've made some progress in that area. We have other areas related to reentry services or workforce development that are critical priorities for us and important for the community. But we may have to start, pulling resources from some of those areas in order to take care of our staff and take care of the resources we need 24/7.
And does the conversation about ICE, and that probably complicates it as well, just the expectations maybe that you might have in the future, that you currently have, that's probably becoming more of a priority in some regards, or part of the conversation at least,
So
right?
we're fortunate. We've had a good partnership with ICE for many years now, and so a lot of the conversations that we're hearing about incarceration and the impacts on prisons and prison populations, we haven't hit us because we've had a good relationship ongoing. Certainly, there could be some things that come down the pipe in the future that we're not really aware of yet. There's some things happening in the courts that we'll wait to hear about. But for right now, we feel like we're sitting in a good position because of the relationship we've had. So luckily, that's not something we've had to worry about in the moment, but certainly could be something that sits out there on the periphery.
And the fact that there are some private prisons in the state, I'm sure, plays a role as well. How does that complicate things for the Department of Corrections, this state-run agency?
Yeah, so it helps us in some ways, but it's another pressure and another factor. So they're great partners of ours. They obviously serve a purpose of housing between 9 and 10,000 of our inmates every day. Really, where it becomes part of this conversation is they also have officers who also need support and resource and need higher wages, and their staff work at about the same wage our staff do. And so anytime we're talking about increasing wages and pay for our staff, we have to include them in that conversation as well. And it's also important for us to make sure that we're using those contracted beds appropriately, but also using them to the extent, the fullest extent we can, because those are financial resources that we're paying for. And so they're good partners to have, and it's certainly another complexity to all of this.
What message do you have to family members and loved ones of people who are incarcerated? Obviously, these are people who committed felonies and they are in the state prison for a reason. But, when you start to see things and you hear about the spike in violence and it's going on, what is your message to people who have a loved one in a prison who might feel nervous about how things are going right now?
My message really is that we're doing everything we can, and they have my assurance that we're doing everything that we can to keep everybody safe, keep everybody healthy, and keep everybody focused on what they need to do to move forward, right? And I think that's what's critically important is in a lot of what we hear, a lot of what we read, a lot of what we see in those snippets you mentioned earlier is detracting from that, is really trying to paint a picture that our staff don't care or that our staff are non-responsive. Which is not the case. Our staff care about the job they do. The people that work inside of prisons go into that work for a reason. And it's often because they want to help people. They want to help their community. They have some drive to do that. And so I want families and friends in the community to know that the staff who are walking the tiers of the prison care about the job that they do. They care about protecting the public, and they care about keeping people safe and secure. Yes, we have situations. Yes, there's violence in prison. We are doing everything possible, everything imaginable to fix that and to address that. We've rolled out more strategies in the last 3 months than probably in the last 30 years when we really think about how aggressive we are approaching this issue, and that's not going to stop. And I want to make sure people know that from me, that that's not going to stop.
Yeah. A final question that I had for you, you have a kind of a marker in here about trying to make sure that you have the same amount of people, that attrition issue is kind of handled. How are things going with that? June 2025 is a marker for you, and so since we're about less than a month out from that, can you kind of give us an update on how that process is going for you and what people can expect as maybe the next marker as it comes to staffing attrition for the correctional officers?
Yeah, so we measure it in 30-day increments, right? And all of the markers from a recruitment standpoint and a staffing standpoint are stable. Now, that's not to say that we have enough staff in all of the places that we need them. We have staffing issues across the state. When I say that they're stable, that means that we're bringing in enough to replace the number that we're losing, right? What we need to do is shut off the number that we're losing, right, or slow that down and bring in as many or more to offset that and to actually grow the number. We're not going to let up. Our goal is that we get our vacancy rate as low as possible. We've gotten it down into the low teens. We're back up almost to 20% statewide. We have some prisons that are at 25, 26% vacancy rates. That's problematic, right? We're solving those problems day to day as best as we can, but the work's not going to stop. And so we're going to keep putting out our staffing markers every 30 days so that people know the progress we're making or the lack of progress. So it's important to me that we're transparent about that. But it also fuels the conversation of how do we provide more support? What can be done to really support the agency going forward? I think that if anything can come from some of this attention right now, it's to give people a better awareness of what the staffing complexities are, why people go into corrections, why they're currently leaving, and how do we really solve those issues. Because I think it's going to take more powers beyond me. It's going to take more resources beyond what I have to really solve this problem long term. And I hope people recognize that and really support us in the efforts that we're putting forward.